Pete.
Great. Well, thanks, Matt. That was really great presentation. I think the narrative for viewability so far has been, well, it's really great. It solves a lot of problems. You know, everyone, obviously you're going to be in favor of it, right? But it also creates its own problems, right? Particularly for publishers. I want to start by asking you, Pete, you know, as a publisher, what are you seeing? What has been the biggest sort of squeeze or pressure on you as a publisher?
Yeah, so this is a topic that we've seen coming for quite a while, and we certainly had conversations for quite a while. They accelerated very rapidly in the last, let's call it 4 or 5 months, and certainly I feel like 2015 there's a switch being flipped around this conversation where we'll spend a lot more time on it. I think the biggest challenge for us, and it's been talked about on numerous panels, so I won't spend a lot of time on this specific point, but you know, with the 15 vendors, we've deployed multiple for tests, and we'll see huge variances. And for us, both on the direct sales side and on the programmatic side, it's really hard to optimize to any one of those systems. So, okay, you're using, you know, vendor X. All right, how do we actually optimize and understand how you're counting these things so that we can actually optimize your business to that measurement?
Right.
And so that's been a very big challenge. But I think the thing I'd like to focus on, the thing that isn't being talked about, I think, in the viewability side is there's a lot of responsibility on the publisher side to design and redesign and rethink the page layout to maximize viewability. I think you pointed that out really well. On the advertiser and agency side, I'd really like to raise the discussion that no one seems to be talking about, which is some ads take 5 or 6 seconds to load. And on a publisher side, at every publication I've ever worked on, the entire product team is obsessed with loading that page as quickly as possible. It's the single biggest thing, some people suggest, and studies have suggested, that drives loyalty with your audience or causes people to leave your site and not come back, is a really slow product experience. So we try to load the site in 2 seconds. An ad doesn't load for 5 or maybe 7 seconds, some of these really huge rich media ads. And we don't start the clock on the viewability measurement until the 50% of that ad is in view. Who's going to spend 7 seconds waiting for that 900 by 250 gorgeous ad to load before scrolling down to do what they came to the page to do? So I think there needs to be a conversation with the ad servers or your rich media vendors or whatever it might be around how do you actually maximize the load time for those ads, and think about that as you're buying placements and doing those kinds of things. So we feel we've done our job when we provide the opportunity, but we can't just have the page hang until that ad loads.
Wait, are those ads out of spec for insertion orders, or these
No.
are just getting through the gate on an exchange programmatically?
Programmatic, direct, just go to any site and look, and it's very, very common. So when we see outliers who are above our benchmarks in viewability, it tends to be because our ads load really quickly. So the biggest driver for us is, what technology are you using? And that's the thing that actually helps us the most from a viewability perspective. So I think it's something that we need to talk about. And when you really care about making, obviously we're all here to have that advertising message be seen by the right people and to change minds and behaviors and ultimately sell products. I think that's the part of the conversation that is not on the publisher to work on.
Right. And Matt, are these the sort of things that you're also hearing from publishers?
Yeah, it's not as much on the page load. There, most folks are. We've got 2 camps. We've got the holy cow, I need to find I now need to start paying for a viewability vendor, ad tech partner, as well. Okay, the cost on that is what, and what's my upside? Seems like more defense for me. I don't see a lot of upside in that. This is more just kind of protecting and defending what we've had all along. And then so that's one camp of kind of mid-tail publishers and even some really larger ones. And then it's the day-to-day negotiations of the spectrum of asks from the buy side that has been challenging. Again, fair and understandable for certain agency groups to have one practice and look to push things more aggressively. That's great, but again, at least try and have an ask that a publisher can have a shot of meeting instead of feeling like there are a few different punches taken. So it's in the weeds trying to help negotiate details of making sure that the actual logistics come through properly, the vendors are vetted, and it's just a fair transaction.
Right. Yeah. The vendor thing gets a lot of attention, right? Because you have the agency coming to you with the vendor that they're using, and you're using a different vendor, and you have different numbers, right? And with even on the same site, you'll have different numbers. So that, and then you have to foot the bill for both of those as a publisher.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is more on the directs side than on the programmatic side. I think there's actually there's maybe a less rocky road on the programmatic side, right. Simply because a lot of the decision, at least with the RTB portion of programmatic, the decisioning can be, do I bid or not bid based on what I'm seeing in my systems. There's less of a, hey, let's match up our counting and these kinds of things, the decisions on the buy side. But regardless, we'll have a buyer come to us on the programmatic side and say, hey, we're bidding more because we're seeing really good viewability numbers from our site. And we might have another vendor come and say, like, hey, viewability is good, it could be better. So it's really difficult to kind of position your product for that and work through that.
Yeah, the one thing we optimistically tell publishers is that it should emphasize PMPs a lot more.
Yes.
I mean, so breaking news. I don't know if you saw from this morning again. IAS just came out with their latest quarterly report. Viewability on exchanges and networks down for the third quarter in a row. So, assuming that's optimistically assuming that's a lot of open auction garbage being thrown in there and not as much publisher specific, there should be another advantage to get out of the open and actually doing deals with publishers that you know and love, because the viewability scores are going to be a lot higher and you're not going to be in this stew of having to try to cherry pick stuff that's being thrown in or snuck in, maybe that it isn't even accurate. That would be probably where the only crossover between viewability and fraud is that obviously there's some fraudulent stuff that isn't viewable as well. Right?
I think ultimately this conversation goes to a really good place. And you could argue that viewability has been factored into a lot of buying for a long time if you're optimizing against measurable KPIs. Whether that's click-through, which everyone knows is not the be-all, end-all, but sometimes it's the thing we gravitate towards. Assuming that you've filtered out bots and these kind, fraudulent activity, you can't click if you can't see.
Sure.
So if you're optimizing towards inventory that's performing and hitting your KPIs, I think there was a session earlier today, Jeremy from IMM talking about, hey, we think about our tier one is what's ringing the bell on the KPIs that we're looking for, and in that sense, absolutely, viewability is a super important piece of this. And measuring viewability explicitly may or may not be important if you're doing a really good job optimizing against those other KPIs. Right. Simply because if you're having post-click activity that's doing the right kinds of things, or clicks, or your brand studies are performing, trending in the right direction, or whatever it might be, those are other proofs of life that show that ad actually had an impact.
Right. So if we get on the list, it's the page design, it's the vendor problem, but I mean, the thing that also really matters is the pricing. What have you seen from that perspective? Where are you on is viewability a floor or a ceiling discussion?
So certainly when someone wants to only buy viewable impressions, our view is that there is an upcharge for that, and we're certainly open to having those conversations and doing that. And then we have to have the conversation around whose system are we using to measure that? What does that reporting look like? Those kinds of things. We'll certainly have that conversation too. And then how do we deal with discrepancies? Let's get that out at the beginning rather than after 120 days when billing departments and our finance department are just going back and forth. Oh, it's great times.
Good times.
Let's try to get that out ahead of that. And what we've largely done is said, all right, from a program perspective, this is the baseline that we're looking to stay above. And for that, we're not necessarily charging a premium. We've got a rate, but I actually feel like our pricing scheme, and I think programmatic is where this is most easily borne out. If things perform, you'll bid higher prices for that. If you see value in that, you set the premium. I was talking earlier, I think premium is a very overused word in our industry, especially in the programmatic space. Premium is the description of a price. It's not the description of a site or a category or whatever it might be. So if you're seeing performance, if it's working, if you value that, you will pay a premium over something that is convenient. That's been a big push for us. And with programmatic especially, we're seeing bidding going up as we have good viewability.
Right. And are agencies responding to that? I know Group M and Unilever, they're way more aggressive than even what the MRC is saying for video, I believe. I mean, what's been the reaction from the agency side? That's one of the limitations here, is that we don't have someone here.
Well, we can go out to the room. We got a few smart agency folks
Sure.
out there. But yeah, what's your...
So
first on that.
generally the discussions are still, we're in for most of the people we talk to at the agency, they're just feeling their way through this as well. Right. So it's not always an easy discussion, but it's a discussion that's actually, we're both saying like, hey, we're new to this, let's figure this out together. That's been the general sense of this. I work in the business news space, and we don't do a lot of business with Unilever specifically, so I can't talk to that.
Sure.
We've got publisher clients that we represent. We actually do programmatic ad sales for a couple publishers now, and we're setting up PMPs to be, at least just to start, above the fold only. So an operations person at the publisher trying to rearrange the items on the private shelf and see how that does, and put a higher price tag on that as a floor, to be able to not just get them out of the open, but to say, hey, we're just going to give you what should be a little better. We know that ATF does not always equal high viewability, because publishers have been surprised that, geez, that stuff at the bottom of the page actually sometimes is better than the 728 by 90 that people scroll within 1 second and are already gone. So, they're making a first attempt at that, and we'll see how that scores off of each of our stats comparatively. The exchange that's being used, unfortunately, doesn't report on it in real time, so we're both going to have to kind of see and play the email game of, hey, what'd you get? I got 82. I got 74. All right, we're close enough. It's looking good. So there'll be a little of that clunking around, but at least folks are recognizing and appreciating the effort. I think it would be great to hear from a couple of folks in here to say where publishers are completely screwed up. The agencies and trading desks that we work with certainly are aggressively pushing the envelope on that. They do recognize that they're still able to drop a cookie on non-viewable. It's fair game and understood. The reason why ad networks have worked so well for 16 years is being able to throw 88 by 31s all over the web and then be able to get a last view attribution. We talked about attribution modeling in the Publisher Roundtable. It's still a challenge where some of the rules of the game are tough for premium content publishers that are trying to do the right thing and putting big ads in all the right places.
Right, yeah. There's some big misconceptions just generally about this, right? You mentioned the conflation of fraud and viewability. Where does that come from? Is this just another education thing that needs to get
the gap
worked
of
out?
understanding?
Yeah.
It's always just education.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of folks assume that, again, those who don't have legal degrees, I don't, but fraud's a legal term, and that's a nefarious thing, and that's a crime that we're all trying to chase and is separate. Viewability, again, is just, how viewable is a print ad when I'm leafing through and I don't get to page 82 in the gorgeous, inside back cover of a magazine. That's not viewable. What's the proof that should be a refund or should be discounted, right? So it's an opportunity to view, and something that, fortunately, the more panels we do and the more people go back and tell their teams, they recognize that, there's one way to weed out non-viewable ads and another way to weed out fraud. I think, the big exchanges have been doing an admirable job starting to step up their game and be better gatekeepers in terms of getting nefarious stuff and botnets out of the way. So it's parallel tracks, working in tandem, all just to get better inventory in front of folks. And the publishers that are doing it the right way will end up winning and rising above, fortunately.
Right, and then you have the other issue of viewed and the ability to be viewed, which is another thing that gets confused as well. So I think we have 5 minutes. I think there might be some time for questions, or maybe some questions out there.
There, speaking of leading by.
Angelina, yes, again. You get a participation award.
Obviously, the larger publisher partners, they have a lot more funds to support or adapt to this. What is your recommendation to those partners that aren't quite as big and may not have the full technology support?
Yeah, it's hard. Ask the viewability partners to have a tiered pricing strategy, because that's a tax. It's a 6 tax to a lot of folks that are in that 10 to 40 million unique range. I'd say on average a month that it's hard to have that math work out. So I'm going to get dinged for not having as many viewable ads, and I'm paying for that information to be told to me. That's tough. So part of it is a lot of smaller pubs go off of DFA or Atlas or comparable third-party ad serving, and so there's a default recommendation of, look, you don't need to pay the tax. Let's just see how it looks on the buy side. But again, hopefully, as there's consolidation and a few of the viewability partners rise and become some of the best of breed, there will be some pricing help to where they'll recognize there's an advantage to bringing the mid to longer tail in. So hopefully those two things.
I would also say that from a design perspective, a lot of publishers will say, oh, we're not growing our inventory as quickly as we can fill it. I know, I'll put another ad on the page.
Yeah, please do.
And that's a really slippery slope that I think a lot of smaller publishers kind of like, we don't have enough for this direct campaign, or we're seeing a lot with, we're seeing success programmatically. Why not a 5th 300 by 250? Or, the thing that always drives me nuts is the leaderboard right by the footer of the site, that the only person who's going to scroll down that far is someone who's looking for a job, or
about us. Right,
yeah.
right.
So I think part of this is also not equating like just more inventory is better, which is often kind of an approach that that smaller publishers may go after, and that by creating some scarcity, you can actually increase the value of the inventory that is there. And the other thing is a lot of the smaller publishers will be using kind of off-the-shelf CMSs, which actually tend to, from a loadability and those kinds of things, can perform much better than really robust, customized content management systems. So maybe that helps them in that regard.
I think we had another gentleman back.
Hey guys, Greg from GumGum. There was obviously the article in New York Times last week about the death of the banner ad, which surprisingly I don't think's been discussed here. But I was kind of curious, when we talk about the MRC definition of viewability, are we fundamentally kind of also missing the fact that consumers have just trained themselves to ignore, even if we redesign a site for a better user experience, that they're still ignoring a banner, and they've trained themselves to do that? And just curious what your thoughts are and how you would see publishers and advertisers maybe looking to start to solve for that more.
Ooh, our first banner blindness question.
Thank you for that. I'd love any time I can be in front of anyone and talk about this. So I think there's a real creative problem with a lot of banner ads. But I think it's also true for TV. I love how suddenly TV is lifted as like the highest form of advertising. I was recently on a flight, an early morning flight, watching TV while doing work, and was shocked at how bad so much of that TV creative. There's great creative out there, but I think fundamentally we're just starting to figure out what we should actually be putting in banners, especially when it comes to making a connection that has more of an awareness, or kind of trying to build preference. So we've seen, when you start building on the best practices of the web generally, rather than taking a print ad and animating it slightly, or taking a video ad and turning the sound, or a TV commercial and turning the sound off, or whatever it might be to make your banner creative specifically, that the blinders are lifted pretty quickly, and that there is really strong interaction rates, and there's all sorts of really powerful things happening there, but it happens that the creative doesn't look like the creative for those other mediums. The internet is as different from a magazine is from a TV station or a radio station, and I think we have to treat those differently. So I don't think it's dead or dying, but I do think you have to really rethink the creative side of that, regardless of how it gets placed.
Yeah, keep in mind, we used to sit at conferences like this 10 years ago and bitch about the punch the monkey ads, or the banners that would be gray screens made to look like your Microsoft Windows was about to explode and you better click here to save it, and then it's an ad for some garbage. So like, we've at least moved out of that, but you've got people that have had a web experience of that with 12 ads on a page for 15 years in a lot of cases. So yeah, I'd be probably turned off if I weren't in this space as well and caring a little more than the average person. So, the DNASCarification is going to help. Nice to not give a plug, but certainly in-image solutions, rich media solutions, others certainly will help. The ability for sight, sound, motion certainly to improve will be better. I don't hear a lot of, I used to work for the woman who then became the head of the Magazine Publishers Association. It's not like advertising is so awesome everywhere else but the interwebs. Come on.
But why is it held to this seemingly higher standard?
Because we're
why is there
digital
more
and because
skepticism?
we can measure things and because we're the fastest growing medium, and this event is part of the fastest growing part of advertising globally. Faster than digital out of home, faster than wearables, faster than anything else, off a pretty damn good base. So, it would be understandable that anyone from mainstream press and my former employer would want to talk about where we can improve it. Yeah, because it's still not there. Jeff Ratner famously told me at a dinner a year and a half ago. I've got head of Zenith Optimedia. I've got 4,000 ways I can target, and my team has handed 4 creative once at the beginning of the campaign. And that's all I've got. That's a challenge. So, again, we dance around it a little bit, but, there aren't a lot of account or creative heads that come to things like this. Awesome that the brands are there. Please take it back. Force your agencies to be able to optimize creative a little better. The reason why Critio's, still got high valuations, they've got one of the best dynamic creative optimizations out there. It's why advertising.com, when a lot of us used to work there back in the day, they're able to optimize and know what works best in front of that audience. Those mechanics haven't really come yet to most of the trading desks. And then, when you layer in sight, sound, motion as branding budgets start to come in, creative had better be better there, because it's going to be coming through the pipes a lot smarter, and to be able to optimize off of what works on a 300 by 250 when it's better placed and organized and not jammed in with 14 others, there'll be even more of a necessity to have good creative.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, all three of you. Yeah.